In film, it's understood that every frame is important. The director decides on everything that shows up on screen. Every detail in an action sequence matters. However, when something isn't done right, it can pull the viewer out of the experience. This happens all the time in film. It can happen when you can see a hand in frame or a microphone. These little details can be noticed by anyone, but there are small details that only certain people will notice. Take this scene from the movie 300. This is the first battle in the movie, and it's just as action-packed as we expected. But being a filmmaker and amateur swordsman, I see some things that take away from the visual spectacle, and the scene looks more like this. So why would a filmmaker want their film to look like this? And not like this? Before we can understand the filmmaker's intentions, we have to understand what's being done wrong.
It's important to note about the 300 is, the Spartan way of fighting is very shield-centric, so a lot of flashy shield play is employed in that film, a lot of it being not necessarily what you would want to do. You can see the Spartans constantly throwing their shields to the side when issuing strikes or thrusts, which is not the point of a shield. You want to keep your shield interposed between you and your opponent, or else it doesn't provide any benefit. Moving it out of the way, but on the other hand, allows a better camera view of the person performing these actions. So it's understandable why, for the sake of cinematography, it's done.
So what does that mean for a scene like this from the film Gladiator?
One-on-one fight scenes are really easy to see mistakes made. So I believe the first problem that comes around is it's a sword and shield play. And Russell Crowe goes in for a thrust with his sword to the opponent, at which the opponent kind of reels back. That's a good reflex. And he has his axe ready above his head, and it's actually past Russell's guard. It's beyond the sword, and nowhere near Russell's shield as he's put it behind his own body in this lunge. Yet, instead of following through with an axe strike to the body where he's perfectly vulnerable, he simply uses the axe to parry the sword blow. That, in the fact that he's dual wielding, is utterly ridiculous because he could simply parry the blow with his offhand, which is actually on the side where Russell is striking, and then simply finish him off, with an axe blow to the back of the head.
This is all well and good for historical films, but what about a scene like this from the Pirates of the Caribbean?
And I practice with them 3 hours a day.
You need to find yourself a girl, mate. Or perhaps the reason you practice 3 hours a day is that you already found one.
Yeah, I think that the fact that they, let's say for example they did employ totally realistic combat, and then still kept, the comedic dialogue between the two characters, that actually might even seem more ridiculous, and I definitely think that even a not experienced audience would be able to pick up that there was something wrong if the combat was so well choreographed, against dialogue that just doesn't support that sort of approach to the film. So there's a couple of exchanges where they do really classic movie combat stuff. I know that again we see a character dual wielding. So Will has 2 swords in his hand, in the latter half of the fight, and he ends up in a edge bind with Jack, who only has one sword. And Will does this, not only does he do the classic I'm gonna strike with both swords, just like we saw in The Gladiator, but they remain there long enough to have witty dialogue, which I think it even contradicts the film itself, because I think earlier in that scene, Will says something about if he ever met a pirate, he would kill it, yet he's sitting here with two weapons, when really, to hold this bind, he would only need one. And he would have a perfect opportunity to strike with the offhand or main hand while these two are talking. But the less realistic combat is more of a priority in that instance, so you can get that character exchange. So the scene would not really be the same without it. If you had realistic combat, it would take away from what the scene was trying to do.
So what does this mean for a film as a whole? I think it's all about the context of the film and what it promises the viewer. If the film promotes historical accuracy, it should have accurate combat. If the film is more lighthearted or more fantasy-oriented, it shouldn't need more accurate combat. However, filmmakers should be cautious of one-on-one fights and close-up scenes. Film is about entertainment, so when showing accuracy, it's important to know what you promise the viewer.